But it's already been done, so we're good.
Fantastic. Would you like to approve them then? Would you like to make a motion?
Never mind.
So
Never
committee of the
mind.
whole, anyone committee of the whole issues? Minutes? No?
I'll make a motion
Amazing.
that we approve the minutes for the committee of the whole for January 4th, 2022.
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstention?
Abstain.
Well done. All right. Next up, discussion on an ordinance amending section 12.28.030 and 12.28.040 of the Murray Municipal Code. We're talking about golf course fees. Kim, hello.
Hello. Get that word. Council, Mayor, thank you for your time tonight. As you just mentioned, our golf course fees are one of our areas that the fees are set by ordinance. So let me just explain to you the process we've gone to put together the golf course fees that we will be proposing in 2 weeks. So we have staff has done a survey of other golf courses. There are 3 that we feel closely resemble ours: Old Mill, River Oaks, and Meadowbrook. So they've put together their proposal for the fees. We have then taken it to the mayor's office. We have also taken it to the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, and they gave it unanimous approval to bring to you in 2 weeks. So we set our fees, or we try and set our fees at about average of what everybody else is, and that's the increases now are average, with one exception. The golf carts, if you look at current golf cart rentals, we are a little bit above average. Now that is because we know that most of the golf courses in the valley are looking at fees right now and are planning to raise golf carts this year because of the cost of golf carts, the cost of maintaining carts, cost of electricity if they use electric carts, cost of fuel if they use gasoline. So by the time we open in the summer, we will be at about average or a little bit below average when compared to other golf courses in the valley. So just to give you an idea, a couple of the key areas, I think, in our 9-hole and 18-hole increases, we are at about 12 to 15%, depending on which one you look at. And again, that brings us right about average market, maybe even a little bit less than average. Golf carts, on the other hand, are a 25% increase. I just tell you that so that you're aware of what the increase is, but we will again be at about average when you're looking at golf courses throughout the valley, and especially those that compare to our golf course. So, and I could go over each one individually, but rather than take the time to do that, maybe if I just ask if you have questions.
Oh, my mic was already on. Do we have any new golf carts yet?
We do have new golf carts.
How many?
And they are in use and have been in use for several months, right, John?
Yeah, we received those about mid-September, and
70. Oh, nice. What did we do with our old ones? Oh, that's right. Now that you say that, I remember that. And then the last question I have is, how many people do we have on staff
How many people do we have on staff?
at the golf course?
So in the pro shop, we have 2 full-time employees. In our in a maintenance area, we have 4 full-time employees. And then, of course, we have a number of seasonal employees, assuming we can find seasonal employees to hire. Last year, we struggled finding seasonal employees in all of our areas. Golf course was a little bit better, but we still weren't fully staffed with seasonal employees.
And I have this question, but does this also cover cost of increase of water or wages? Are you guys having problems with wages at all? or anything like that?
It
Could
certainly
cover it?
helps. It
Yeah.
certainly helps cover the cost of operating the golf course. When you talk about the golf carts specifically, obviously we don't set our prices to make a profit, but we try and set revenue so that we're at least paying for the cost of the golf carts and the maintenance of the golf carts and fuel and they're all electric now, electricity.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right.
Okay, we'll see you in 2 weeks then. Thank you.
See you there. Thanks, Kim. All right, next up we have our legislative updates. Councilmember Dominguez, you have 15 minutes.
That is me. I'm not going to take 15 minutes. I promise. But I've been thinking about this because it's been an interesting session, and I'm going to pass this around so you guys have it. There are a few things that are coming down the pipeline. Big question and big conversation was yesterday. They talked in detail and with the head of the water administration under the governor in the governor's office about secondary water metering amendments and what that looks like. There was a lot of back and forth discussions and conversations about ARPA money and using ARPA money. The other biggest discussion that they had was to item C on here, the housing and land use for SB 34. It's coming down the pipeline. Cameron has spent a lot of time with Representative Waldrop in regards to this and negotiating some terms that cities feel comfortable with, because it's going to pass either way and it will change the way that we as a city govern. And when it comes to growth, and, you know, there's not enough space, I guess, or not enough land to continue to buy or use for single family homes. But also the biggest message that I got from that meeting, and maybe you can help me with this, is we need to figure out as a city what we want our communities to look like with mixed use development, period. There's no way around it. It's going to happen. It's going to be pushed. So Cameron from the League has really taken it on. There was a few questions about, transportation. There's a transportation bill that he's also bringing out for transportation hubs, and Murray, of course, having front runner and tracks. We will have to look at those transportation plans in more detail as well. So growth is coming and we need to be mindful. And so that's a bill that we can look at. And if you are curious about it, please follow SB 34. Let's see. There are a few bills that are pending. I have more here. Sorry, my notes are all over the place because it was kind of one of those days where they spent a lot of time on one thing and then went really fast on the other. HB 85 is about eminent domain, and they want to refuse cities to use eminent domain for purposes of parks. The League is against it because if we have to, we should, is what the consensus was there amongst the League. Yeah, that's kind of my sigh, is because we're in the part of the session where everything is moving pretty fast. This is a good guide to what is there. There's also the emails, and I'll forward you guys this email that came out yesterday in response to the different committee meetings and that ULCT was a part of. There is a legislative policy committee and just some database that we have. In the last year, Utah increased its population from 8,000 to 14,000 in just apartment rentals. In condos, it went from 7,000 to 789. For single family homes, it went from 15 to 17,000. So we, as far as builders, they are building and building and building and building, but we're seeing the highest jump of population growth in the state has ever seen. So again, the biggest push was, what do we want our cities and our communities to look like? The one question I did have for the representative was, what are his non-negotiables? And he said there really wasn't anything, but there was an open idea that we can decide what goes into our locations, whether it be apartments or condos, twin homes, that the council and, cities have the power to make those decisions. So there's a little bit of, I don't know. It was just kind of a weird feeling yesterday at ULCT is all I have to say. So if you want more information, I do have more information. I will give you, our lobbyists are up there. I'm going to probably meet with them a little bit this week as well. But they are working, one of the bills, eminent domain is the big one. HB 151, retail facility incentive payment amendments is also another one. HB 182, local health department order amendments, that was heard today. And capital assets of water, HB 269. So that's a little update. Any questions? No? We will circle back around at the next meeting and let you know what has come to fruition. I do want to emphasize, and maybe it's working, and just looking at the HB 242 about secondary water metering, it seemed like there's just a lot of pressure to implement that, and it can be very costly, and because of ARPA funding, they're really pushing it. So that they use ARPA funding to fund it, and also we use ARPA funding to fund it. So we may need to look into that. I don't know. Maybe we don't. Maybe I don't know. So that's where we're at.
Thank you for following all of that and advocating and being up there. We appreciate that. Next up, we have our annual Open and Public Meeting Act, and then a harassment training by GL. Thank you.
I'll see if I can do this in 30 minutes. I think I can. For those of you who are new, and those of you who have been here for a while, you've seen this before. We are required to have annually training on the Open Public Meetings Act, and that is a state law that requires us to not just meet in public, but invite the public to observe as we do the city's business. As I said, it's required by state law. It is the city council chair's responsibility to make sure that we have this each year. The public policy here is, let me back up for a second and say this. Why is this important that we get this right, Open Public Meetings Act? And that is, as city council members in the mayor council form of government, or council mayor, I think is how it's said in the statute, you act together and you exercise your authority only on the dais. When you leave here tonight and you go as individuals back into the community, you don't have the same authority that you have now. So we need to get this right. If you violate this act, it is possible to have whatever you've decided to voided. So it's important that we do this right, and that goes from start to finish. And I'll go through those things. Also, I will say it can be very challenging when you are outside this room and you have a constituent, you have a business, you have a developer, you have anybody who wants to talk to you. And it's usually because they have something coming up. And that's where you have to be very, very careful in terms of meeting with people, meeting alone, what you say. You can't, as an individual, bind the city, but that's not what they're going to say. So just be very careful that way and understand that this is where you do your business, is on the dais. Also, just to follow up on that, a council member acts as part of the council and sets policy. But the day-to-day carrying out of that policy is up to the administrative side, the mayor's side. So please keep that in mind as well. The public policy, as you see behind the Open Public Meetings Act, is that you deliberate openly, that you act openly. And those are two very important things. It's also important to remember this. This is a business meeting, essentially. And that means the open part of this act means that it has to be open for public observation. It's not a requirement that the public speak unless they're invited. At a public hearing, it is a requirement they're allowed to speak. At citizen comment, they're allowed to speak. And that brings up one little, let me just digress for just a minute. Citizen comment those are comments the citizens can bring up that are not already, matters that are not on the agenda. That's the only thing they can bring up. If they bring up something on the agenda, they need to be told to wait, sit back, and then come back to the microphone. And the purpose of the citizen comment is just to get a feel for what are the citizens thinking. During that period, you can.
Oh, Gio, sorry.
Yes. Yeah.
Is the citizen comment portion what you just referenced? Are you referencing when it's a public hearing?
No.
Oh, it could be at any given point on the
No.
agenda.
So we have on the agenda
Okay.
a specific time for that citizen
Okay.
comment. And what you'll see oftentimes is somebody will get up and say something, and oftentimes it's pretty serious, and everybody will look at them like, thank you very much, and go on to the next one. And there's kind of this, I think, this awkward silence, but that's kind of how it is. Now, you can, under certain circumstances, carefully discuss what somebody brings up, but you can't make any decisions on it. So it is oftentimes just best to say thank you for your comments. We've taken those down. You know, we can talk to the mayor or whatever else, and then move on. Let's see. Your public hearings, of course. So sometimes we don't make the distinction correctly between a public meeting and a public hearing. A public meeting is what we have every city council meeting. That's public. Public's invited. A public hearing is when they're invited to actually speak. And sometimes we talk about participation. Participation simply means they make comments and speak to you and speak on the matter that's on the agenda. So then you go through this statute and you find the definition of a meeting is when you convene as a quorum to act on the public's business. And that could be discussing a matter that you have jurisdiction over or the authority to make a decision on. It could be receiving comments from the public or acting upon it. And when I say acting, that's simply voting. You hear what people say, you have your packet, you deliberate when you discuss, and then you have a motion, a second, and a vote, and that is your acting on a matter. As far as chance gatherings or social gatherings, those are not meetings unless you make it that way. And that is if you start to discuss something that's coming up on the agenda in the future, now you violated the Open Public Meetings Act. So you can get together, you can socialize, but you can't talk shop unless you put that on the agenda and invite the public to that same place. So quorum, of course, is a simple majority. For our purposes, that's 3 city council members. It's also important to remember that as far as Murray City Council is concerned, it takes 3 votes to pass, 3 yes votes to pass something. Let's see, that's in our ordinance, and then we've got also the public notice portion of the Public and Open Public Meetings Act. The public notice is simply the city telling the public what is coming up, and we do that in 2 ways. One is every year we give a schedule of all the meetings that will be held. And that's for every board as well as the city council and the commissions. The second way we do this is for every meeting we post an agenda. And there's a 24-hour requirement that it's posted before the meeting so that the public has the opportunity to look at the topics and see if they're interested in joining or not. Those are the notice requirements. And then we also, you'll notice that outside your city council office, there's a little glass window. That's where it's posted. It's posted across the hall. It's posted on the Utah Public Notice website. It's interesting to note that for years we put most of these notices in the paper, many of them. And these notices have the legislature has gone to this online posting, which is a kind of a new thing for us. There is a possibility to have an emergency meeting where you don't have time to post the notice 24 hours before. So you do the best you can under those circumstances. I can't think of a time when we would really do that, but it's a possibility, I suppose. As far as the agenda, you'll see this as a piece of paper and topics are on there. The requirement is that we use language that is reasonably specific to notify the public of what we're going to discuss and what we're going to act on. Each topic has its own agenda item. And then again, I mentioned before, a topic raised by someone in the public can be discussed, but there can't be a decision on it unless it's on the agenda. Closed meetings, that's kind of the part that people like, but we really rarely get to that point. There are only certain reasons and circumstances you can close a meeting, and that you only do that when you have an open meeting, and then you vote to close it. It takes 2/3 of you of those present to close the meeting. And there are certain reasons that you can close the meeting, and I've listed those in your packet. Occasionally I could see us doing that for real estate purchases. There may be a couple of things, but we don't typically close our meetings.
In 8 years,
Once last year, I think.
twice.
Yeah.
In 8 years, that's,
Yeah.
I mean, we just don't do that.
Honestly, that's probably the best way to do it, because then the public doesn't wonder what are you doing behind closed doors. Although there are some really justifiable reasons to do it if we need to. But in a closed meeting, you still take minutes. Under GRAMA, those are not public. The meeting is recorded, just like every other meeting, and then it's just kept. I assume it's kept in the council office. Or by you? Okay. Locked with the recorder's office. That's great. And then electronic meetings has kind of been a new topic for us because of COVID. Pre-COVID, the rule was that you could only have an electronic meeting if there was a quorum present and someone was on business and couldn't be there. That was basically the only time you could have an electronic meeting. After COVID and during COVID, we determined, I think most cities determined, that there was an emergency ongoing pandemic that allowed us to have electronic meetings because of the public safety and our safety. In a special session, I believe it was, the legislature passed a bill that has a limited ability for electronic meetings, and that is when there's, let me back up for a second. There's this distinction that needs to be made is you can have an electronic meeting with an anchor location. Anchor location is where the public comes and where there's a quorum. And that's, again, limited circumstance. For us, it's if somebody's traveling out of state or out of the area. That's really the only time. And I'll tell you why I think that is a good policy. When we were meeting online during COVID, I recall discussions with the city council where I think it was Councilmember Turner basically said it's not the same thing without having the public here. And I think that contact, that in-presence contact, makes a difference. As you see body language and you feel the emotion a little bit better, I think, than you do online. I think it makes a difference. And so I think that's a good policy to continue, which is we kind of frown on electronic meetings. Then you have circumstances where it's not possible to meet together because of a health emergency, for example. An earthquake, I suppose, would be a possibility. And you can have a meeting without an anchor location. It's a remotely a meeting, obviously. So long as the chair makes the determination that there's a safety risk and that goes out on the agenda. That's a little bit of a change from what we did during COVID. It's got to go on the agenda with a summary of the determination. And then that determination expires in 30 days. But again, I really think the legislature didn't intend to open up electronic meetings frequently. I know in the past several weeks there's been one that I'm familiar because it came out of my office, a board that wanted to meet electronically, and I think they did meet electronically, but it really was just an oversight. We need to be back together in these public meetings. Next slide is enforcement of the Open Public Meetings Act. One thing to keep in mind is, again, this is our business meeting that we have, and disruptions that are unreasonable can be removed from the meeting. Again, final actions, if it violates the Open Public Meetings Act, are voidable, and you can have public enforcement by the Attorney General or District Attorney. You can also have a private lawsuit enforcement by a citizen that compels compliance with the rule, the law. And then closed meeting violations, which are obviously serious, are Class B misdemeanors. So I think the message is we really want to keep these things open for the public, to do your business in public so they can see. I found a year or so ago that Utah enacted the very first sunshine law in 1898, which I thought was kind of a good legacy to have. And with that, unless you have questions, I'll go on to the next one.
Questions? All right, thank you.
Let's see. So we were talking as a council a couple years ago, I think it was, and this idea that Open Public Meetings Act is an annual training came up, and there was a suggestion that we ought to also do the same thing for harassment training, and so we have begun that. I think it was a year or two ago, maybe just last year. The city's policy is to maintain a work environment that is free from discrimination and intimidation. And the thing that you need to keep in mind tonight is this: there's a separation of powers, as you know, between the mayor and between the city council. The mayor does not enforce this policy in terms of the city council. This is your policy, and this would be enforced a different way, and we'll get into that a little bit in a couple minutes. But it's important to know the city has a policy for employees, and if an employee violates that policy, there's an investigation, and the supervisor gets involved, possibly the department head. I may get involved, HR may get involved, but there's an investigation as promptly as possible, and we deal with that. And the idea to deal with that is to make sure that it doesn't happen again, just stop it. So keeping that in mind, the council added Rule 9 to the council rules, and that is your anti-harassment policy, and applies to you folks. And again, something to keep in mind is you are elected. If one of you were to violate this policy, you couldn't be fired. Now, you could be disciplined in some way, whether it's a censure by the rest of the council, or if it rises to a very serious level, then there can be other measures taken. But by and large, this is not the same thing as I said before, as an employee having violated this policy. You see on your screen how it's defined. It basically comes down to unwelcome conduct that's based on a protected class, or that's gender, national origin, age, that type of thing. And the conduct that's harassing is maybe not as obvious as it could be. It can be just demeaning comments, gestures, physical conduct that's based on those classes. It's also obviously can be of a sexual nature, but I think as a city council person, any of these could occur, but I think you're most likely to see conduct that is either intimidating or hostile or offensive, maybe by statements or something. And it's important to also understand that this unwelcome conduct can be anybody that does this. It can be a vendor, it can be an employee, it can be anybody can violate this rule. Also, either gender may harass, and either gender may be a victim of harassment. There's a list of those things that are inappropriate conduct, and really what it comes down to is if it makes somebody uncomfortable or it's intimidating, it's wrong. It's pretty simple that way. Those are the laws that apply: federal law, state law, and then your own council rule. So in terms of reporting and how this works, if one of you sees conduct or is the subject of such conduct, then you need to report that. We had talked about this, a year or two ago and decided that would come to me if it's against you. If it is a city employee, that would go to the mayor. That's something you would report. You could easily talk to Jennifer or talk directly to the mayor, and that would go the different route. Or if it's really, we can help with just about anybody who does something, whether it's a vendor or whoever else. But just keep in mind, there is that separation. But you do have a way to report it. There'll be a prompt investigation. And as much as possible, we would keep the investigation confidential. You can't keep everything confidential, but as much as you possibly can, we would. And then we don't tolerate this at Murray City, obviously. Corrective action would be taken if we find that there's been a violation. And we also don't retaliate. It's against the law to retaliate against somebody who does make a complaint. So, any questions on that? Okay.
Thank you for doing both of those trainings. They're both very important. And on that, we will, I believe, adjourn. Yes. Jennifer, do you have any announcements?
I do not.
Okay, then let's adjourn until council meeting at 6:30. Thank you.